prediction video for UFC Fight Night Vettori versus Holland. Let's start at the bottom. The first fight is Impa Kasanganay versus Sasha. I can't say his last name. To me, I think it's just two good strikers going at it, and I'm just leaning towards Sasha. To me, Impa, I think he's just too big. I don't know how well he's going to look after this weight cut. He wasn't a small middleweight. I think that's going to be the biggest thing, is that both these guys are technique and volume over anything. And I think if the weight cut is really affecting Impa, then I think Sasha's going to overwhelm him and win by decision. Like I said, until I see him fight at this new weight, I can't pick him. Like I said, if he looks good after this fight, I'll have more faith in him, but until then, I'm leaning towards Sasha. Next is Da and Jung versus William Knight, and to me, this is basically two good strikers with decent wrestling on each side. I'm leaning slightly towards Knight. I just think he has more knockout power, and I think that's going to be the biggest difference, is that these guys, Jung was literally about to fight at middleweight. I think he's a smaller light heavyweight, and I think Knight is clearly a very big light heavyweight. And I think, like I said, their overall skills are basically even. It's just the power, and I think when he lands shots, he's going to do more damage, so I'm leaning towards Knight. Next is Luis Saldana versus Jordan Griffin, and to me, I think this is going to be a close back-and-forth grappling fight, but I'm leaning ever slightly towards Griffin because I think he's just a little bit better there. I think both these guys have okay striking, but they're both primarily grapplers. And like I said, I think Jordan Griffin's just a little bit better. I think it's going to be really close, though. I think it's going to be a close, split decision. But yeah, I'm just ever slightly leaning towards Griffin, and I think that's what this fight's going to be. It's just a close back-and-forth grappling fight. Next is Hunter Azure versus Jack Shore, and to me, this fight depends entirely on how round 3 goes, because I think Hunter gets really tired the longer it goes, and Jack Shore, I think he can keep the same pace all 3 rounds. And the biggest thing is if he can finish Hunter in the later rounds, because Hunter uses just a lot of big actions and it makes him gas. And I think Jack Shore's the more even-paced guy. They're pretty similar styles. They're both grappler strikers. I would say Shore probably has the better overall jiu-jitsu. And for me, I'm just leaning towards Shore. I think he survives the first 2 rounds because I don't think Hunter's like a big one-shot knockout guy. I think it's just one of those things where the longer it goes, the more it's going to favor Shore later, and I'm predicting a late 3rd round submission by Shore. Next is Jorgen De Castro versus Georges Dejano, and Georges hasn't fought in forever. I don't think you never know, maybe he's made a lot of improvements, but when he was in the UFC, he didn't look super amazing. He just looked mediocre. I think his record's like 1 loss and 1 draw. Jorgen has also not looked amazing, but I think Jorgen's definitely the younger and more, he's been fighting more regularly is the best way to put it. And I think that's just going to be the biggest thing. I think it's going to be a striking fight back and forth, but I think Jorgen's eventually going to win by knockout. Next is John Makdessi versus Ngannou. I can't say his name. This is basically just 2 really good kickboxers. I saw Ngannou on the Contender Series, and he fights really well. He throws really good volume, and he fights really long. He has a really long arms and legs. My biggest thing is I think Makdessi's still the better overall striker. I think we've seen guys have a really hard time getting in on Makdessi. And if you can't use wrestling to kind of offset Makdessi, and you aren't significantly better than him at striking, he usually is just able to outpoint people. I think that's what's going to happen in this fight. I think he's just going to be able to control the range and win by decision. I don't think it'll be an exciting fight. I just think Makdessi has that style where he just slows fights down and can just kind of outpoint people. And I think that's what's going to happen in this fight. I think he's just going to make Ngannou overextend, and he's just going to be able to touch him with jabs and leg kicks and win a clear-cut decision. Next is Scott Holtzman versus, I can't say his first name, but Gamrot. And to me, Gamrot looked really good in his UFC debut. He lost a really close split decision against another really good up-and-comer. This fight's tough just because I think Holtzman has this style where he can just keep coming at dudes, and he throws strong strikes. He doesn't have one-punch knockout power, but he has solid hitting power, and he throws good volume, and that's his biggest strength. I'm leaning slightly towards Gamrot just because I do think this fight's going to hit the ground at least more than once, and I think in terms of overall jiu-jitsu, Gamrot has a pretty big advantage. The overall wrestling's pretty close, but I would also favor Gamrot out slightly. The biggest area where I think Holtzman has the advantage is in just the straight kickboxing, but it's not by much, and because of that, like I said, I think the overall grappling, Gamrot has the advantage, and because I think he's going to win at least a 29-28 decision, if not, maybe potentially get a submission late. Holtzman's never been submitted, but I think that Gamrot's a little bit better than a lot of the grapplers he's fought in terms of his ability to get takedowns and go for submissions. He's usually fought one or the other, just wrestlers or jiu-jitsu guys. Gamrot's one of those guys that's good at both. I don't know if he finishes him, but I do think he wins at least 2 of the 3 rounds, so I'm leaning towards Gamrot. And I do think this is probably going to be the fight of the night. It's either this or the main event or co-main event. Next is Jim Miller versus Joe Solecki, and to me, I'm just leaning towards Jim Miller because I think, one, his striking overall is better, and I think his submission game's better. The only area I think Joe's better is overall wrestling. Jim has been put in positions where he's just been trapped on his back before, and that could happen in this fight, but like I said, I just think he has a big advantage in the striking and jiu-jitsu, and I think other than him just getting pinned for 3 straight rounds, which could happen, I think he's just the better overall fighter, and I think he's going to win by knockout or submission in probably the first round. So I'm leaning towards Jim Miller. On the main card, the first fight is Mike Perry versus Daniel Rodriguez, and to me the biggest thing is these guys fight the same way, but Perry hasn't looked as good since he's left the gym in New Mexico, the Mike Jackson or whatever. You know, ever since he moved to his new gym, because I think he doesn't have to pay his trainers as much, he hasn't looked as good. His volume doesn't look as good, and his overall striking ability doesn't look as good. His grappling still looks decent, but that's mainly because he's always been like a power grappler. I don't think this is going to work against Rodriguez. I think Rodriguez is just as good as him as wrestling and jiu-jitsu. I think these guys fight almost the exact same way, but Rodriguez is fighting with Cerrone all the time, and we've seen it. It looks like he gets better every fight. As where Perry's training within this nothing gym just so he can make more money by, not having to pay his coaches as much. And because of that, I think we're going to see Rodriguez basically do what Tim Means did. I think he's just going to outpoint Perry for 3 rounds and win a pretty clear-cut 30-27 decision. Next is Nina Nunes versus Mackenzie Dern. I think someone changed the name, but it's not Nina. It's what's her face? Maybe it is Nunes. Maybe she changed her last name, but I can't remember where she's ranked. She's ranked like 4 or 5. She's really good. She's a really good striker, but my biggest thing is she always gets taken down in almost every fight she's in, and because of that, I think Mackenzie Dern, as long as she can get the takedown, I think she wins by sub. Even though Nina's ranked a lot higher, I think if she gets taken down, she'll probably get submitted. If she can keep on the feet, I think she outpoints Mackenzie Dern all day. She's definitely the way better striker, but I do just see a takedown happening eventually, and I'm leaning towards Mackenzie to get a submission. Next is Sam Alvey versus Julian Marquez, and to me, the biggest thing in this fight is, like most Sam Alvey fights, I think if people just try to stay away from him, they can beat him. He doesn't throw a lot of volume, and he kind of just waits for counter shots. I think that if Julian just stays away from him and throws jabs and leg kicks, he can win. But that's not how he fights. He likes to just be in people's faces and throw big shots and try to knock people out. And I hope he does that because I think if that's what happens, this fight will be really fun back and forth. But I do think Alvey's the heavier hitter, especially in those type of punching exchanges. And because of that, I'm leaning towards Alvey. I just think Julian's going to fight him like that. I don't think he's going to fight him technical. I think he's going to fight how he always fights, which is just in your face trying to knock you out. And if he does that, I think Sam Alvey's going to catch him sooner or later, and I'm just leaning towards Sam Alvey to get a first or second round knockout. Next is Arnold Allen versus Sadiq Youssef, and to me, both these guys are so weird because they're both so good, but they like almost never fight. It feels like they only fight like once a year, maybe 2 times at most. And it feels like they should be fighting higher ranked people, but because they're just so inactive, I'm not surprised they're fighting each other. It's kind of like the UFC just needs one of these guys to rise up if they're not going to be fighting that often. I know it's like random injuries that they can't control, but it's just a fact. I mean, if you're not active, then it's hard for the UFC to, put a lot of backing behind you. You got to be active. Unless you're like a huge superstar, obviously, but like if you're a medium star, then you need to be active. This is the thing. I think that overall, the striking is basically even, but Sadiq definitely hits way harder. And then on the ground, Allen has a huge advantage. Sadiq is a really good takedown defense, and I think Allen will have a hard time taking him down. But I think if Allen ever takes him down, he'll win by submission. I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is just going to be a close back-and-forth kickboxing match. And I'm leaning slightly towards Allen. I just think he's a little bit better at controlling the range. And because of that, I think he'll just outpoint him slightly on the outside, but I do think this is going to be a really close fight. But vice versa, like I said, I think if Allen can ever get this to the ground, I won't be surprised if he wins by submission. But yeah, I just think Allen has more wins to win, and I think he's just a little bit better with his overall movement on the feet. So I'm leaning towards Allen to win by decision. Finally, we have Marvin Vettori versus Kevin Holland, and to me, if this is just a straight kickboxing fight, I think he can go either way. If Marvin Vettori just chooses to grapple with him, I think he wins all day. But I don't think he will. Marvin Vettori doesn't use his wrestling offensively that often. And it's weird, but I'm leaning towards Holland because I think Marvin Vettori is just going to walk into something big. I think Holland is the longer striker, and I think that he's good at throwing counter shots too. And I think Vettori has the style where he likes to just be aggressive. And I think eventually Holland's going to set him up with a big uppercut or knee as he's coming in. I don't know why I feel that way, but I'm just leaning towards Holland. I just think he has the better overall striking, and I think he's going to catch him coming in with something. So I'm leaning towards Holland to get a first or second round knockout. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Please like and subscribe.